Hello, I'm Christopher, and this is my co-host Wes, sorry.
Wes.
And Wes, do you want to introduce yourself for people who are not yet familiar with you?
I think most people are, but Wes Sturdivant from Eagle, Missouri. I'm just doing this podcast for inquiry into many topics. And with Christopher, we hope to learn something through this inquiry, and that's all.
Yeah, that's fine. So today we're going to dive into an analysis of a brief clip in which Ben Shapiro discusses his position on gay marriage. So let's just dive right into the clip.
Okay.
Sort of agree on. I haven't agreed with everything, but I'm letting you talk. People always yell at me. They say you don't yell back at your.
Well, let's do the spicy.
Let's get into some other stuff. So the gay marriage thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk gay marriage.
Sure.
You're not big on gay marriage.
No, I'm not on a social level. I think the government ought to be completely out of the business of marriage. I think the government sucks at everything.
Okay, so suffice to say, I don't think he literally means everything. Such a universally quantified claim would get him into trouble. Let us say that he's saying, let D be the domain of discourse. For every object in the domain of discourse D, the government is not good at the things in that set. Right. Let's give him a charitable interpretation.
Yeah. And to be fair, I can't think much that the government is good on. So,
well, remember, the inability to conceive, if one fails to, of something the government is good at.
No.
Right. But furthermore, it may be difficult to determine what being good at something means, right?
Yeah.
If you succeed at failing at something, are you good at failing?
They might be good at that.
Right. So so implicit in this is the question of what does it mean to be good at something? But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, right?
It may be good military.
Perhaps, or perhaps not, right? If it fails to make a good military decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just move on.
Is my short message for today. The government is terrible at everything. If the government's goal was to
He did make the concession short message today, so I'm going to assume I pay him what I believe to be the complement of my assumption that he is competent enough to understand that it can't literally apply to everything.
Yeah.
Or traditional marriage utterly failed, obviously, as proved.
But you don't mind it being out of the business of traditional marriage at all.
No,
right?
I think the government should be out of all marriage. I think the government stinks at this.
The government should be out of all marriage. Okay, I'm going to remember this.
Now, I will say that I think that the idea of the government subsidizing gay marriage is silly because I don't think that there's societal benefit to gay marriage. If you're going to make the argument that
the claim is that there is no societal benefit to gay marriage.
What about just happy people?
I'm sorry?
What about just happy people? Isn't that a goal of our country and of being, is just being happy with somebody you love? That would be a beneficial thing right there, I think.
I want to wait and let this unfold and kind of build the structure of the argument in a direction where we can draw out a potential contradiction.
Okay.
Government should be involved in marriage at all.
Yeah.
Which is not even an argument with which I agree at this point.
But it's the way it is right now.
Right.
So let's just go from that.
Okay. So
that base.
So before I get there, one quick point. The reason I want the government out of the business of marriage is because now that the government has enshrined gay marriage, the next step is going to be going to religious people and telling them they have to engage with same-sex weddings.
That doesn't follow.
No.
It's possible.
It's a slippery slope, maybe.
It's a possible consequence, but it doesn't follow from the assumption of the antecedent. It's not a valid argument. It's also not very strong claim, I don't think.
So as a religious person, this is problematic to me. I want a society in which I can.
Well, so it seems that there's a government related concern, but there's also the concern of the possible religious implications. I wonder, is he considering the disjunction or the conjunction of these two things? I'm not sure.
can do what I want, and I don't have to care what you think, and you can do what you want, and you don't have to care what I think.
Right.
That doesn't mean you get to come into my synagogue and get married.
So it seems that Ben Shapiro is thinking from a libertarian perspective
Yeah.
in this case.
And although he's religious, he does want separation of church and state in this clip, which we find out later. But
The only danger potentially with libertarianism, is if you say that you want to maximize the liberties of others, so far as like there's no infringe. If you don't want to infringe on the liberties of others, right?
Yeah.
But preserve the liberties you have. This could be potentially problematic. Like, suppose that we consider the occupancy of space, if such a thing occurs, by bodies of matter. So there's some volume V1, V2, Vk for k such objects, right? And let these objects be people. Over a finite volume of space, as the population grows large, if I ascribe to each of these persons, say, the liberty to move about in some area a sub k, corresponding to this kth entity in question, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want any other person to encroach on that mobility, then each person for a finite volume, their area will shrink. And so to preserve the ability of each person to move unimpeded, the area over which every individual kth person is allowed to move asymptotically goes to zero. And so it's not clear what we mean by the preservation of liberties and the avoidance of encroaching on the liberties of others. Those things are potentially problematic. And this is a problem, systemic perhaps, to libertarianism.
yeah, we'll have to go over that later.
Yeah, right. Perhaps for another video.
In depth.
I agree.
It also doesn't mean that I have to go to your gay wedding.
Right. And
Right,
that's
so this is-
see, that's an interesting place to have the discussion, because I would argue for gay marriage for the exact reasons. I don't want the government involved in all of these things.
Right.
And that's exactly why gay marriage should exist. And I think if Rand Paul had hit that point harder, it would have made a sensible libertarian argument.
So this does kind of affirm the direction of a pseudo-libertarian position, beyond reasonable doubt. If he's not strawmanning him, let's see if the concession follows from Ben Shapiro.
For limited government. And you know
I
what?
tend-
You want to marry a dude? Go ahead. And you want to smoke weed? Go ahead.
You're right. Well, I tend to agree. Both of those things I agree with.
Okay, so I think he's just affirmed beyond reasonable doubt that he is considering a libertarian position.
Mhm.
In which case, it's going to make it very difficult for him to square his opposition to gay sex. Because he can disagree with it, but he's not in a position, shall we say, to prevent it.
No.
It's not an immediate problem.
And I don't
right?
think
He's not required.
and I don't think he's going to, but we can watch more. Go and play.
And by the way, I find people who smoke weed unbelievably irritating, but that's not my business.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the beauty of America is you don't have to give a crap what I think.
We
So this is-
usually end the show by taking a bong hit.
Oh yeah, well, it's gonna be awkward then.
No, okay.
But the as far as the secondary argument about let's take the predicate that government is now involved in marriage.
Yeah.
Should government subsidize gay marriage and straight marriage the same way? My answer is no, because the only purpose for the government getting involved in marriage is the procreation of the next generation and the raising of that generation. And it's my belief that a man and a woman do a better job of raising a child and producing children, obviously biologically.
Okay. So the first thing is that a man and a woman do a better job of producing a child, obviously biologically. Well, let us say raising a child, right? Not just producing one.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what he's trying to say implicitly. And it's not well, let me just play a little bit more before I
Than two men or two women.
But isn't the child part of it sort of secondary? I mean, there are plenty of people that get married, gay couples and straight couples that don't have kids.
This is
So
societal
marriage
change.
in and of itself isn't just about.
But at a governmental level, I don't care about those people. Or meaning, like I care. I'm happy that they're happy, but I don't really care what they do. Like it doesn't. The government theoretically has an interest in the production of the next generation.
Right.
Right. That's the only interest in marriage. So in fact, you could even make a case that the government ought to be giving, basically tax benefits for having kids, and no benefit for marriage. Right. But the truth is, the reason that this was created in the first place, obviously, is because long before the advent of modern birth control,
Mhm.
the fair assumption was that if you were having sex, then you were going to get pregnant, right? At least if you were having straight sex, you were going to have pregnant. You were going.
Right.
I don't know if it follows from the assumption that the government wants to preserve its future population, that it should necessarily incentivize people to have children. Just look at China.
Yeah.
It's not enough. It doesn't follow from the antecedent that that's necessarily true, because if people overproduce, or shall we say over reproduce, they reproduce too much, the growth rate of the population is too excessive, then it's possible that the government would actually want to penalize people for reproducing at such a rate. And so it's not enough that the government would necessarily incentivize people to have children.
Do we know that that's the reason that our government actually did start doing that?
I'm not sure. But even if it
You
was,
said obviously, but I don't know.
right, on the assumption that the government
Obvious.
is interested in the preservation of the next generation, it wouldn't necessarily follow that they would incentivize people to have children without regard for how many children, but furthermore, at what time and under
Yeah.
what conditions. You see, if a person was, say, in a position to have children, but not ready to take care of the children, right, we wouldn't
Yeah.
want them to.
Yeah.
So here's a question. I want to now consider the biological claim. That is to say that, well, before I do that, I just want to let it play a little more.
You get pregnant. And thus, we wanted to incentivize people to stick around for that because single motherhood is bad for the community.
Interesting.
Okay.
So if single motherhood is bad for the community, I don't think, actually, his claim is not specific enough. It's not enough that the mothers be single, or shall we say not be single, because it's not any guy that can stick around, right? He's saying it should be the father of the child and the mother of the child, if and when a child is born by these people. So it's not enough to say that the mother can't be single. And so the implication is the biological connection previously mentioned. But suppose now, if we analyze the claim of the biological the relevancy of biological relation, right? That a biological mother and father therefore have a better predisposition to raising their child. Let us first consider a case where the mother and father have an accelerated rate of some muscular degenerative disease that, for whatever reason, their child does not inherit. But shortly after birth, they undergo a rapid deterioration and are no longer able to care for the child shortly thereafter. It would seem like we have a counterexample, in which case the claim of biological mother and father being universally, superior would have to be stepped down to an existentially quantified claim. But as soon as it's existentially quantified, it seems it loses its power, right? Because then it's only, well, sometimes this is the case that mothers, and as soon as you turn it into an existentially quantified claim of, well, in some cases this is true, there's wiggle room for, okay, but what about the exceptions?
Yeah.
For example, in the case of these two people that maybe they shouldn't try to reproduce because of their genetic profile, should they never be permitted to have sex, or would we want to, would we want to rely on their ability to never ever engage in sexual activity? Or would it perhaps be better that we had some kind of contraceptive available, such that if they ever engaged in some kind of sexual activity, they would be less likely to conceive and avoid these kind of complications?
Overall, it seems that maybe that's what the government first started to do it for, but now those reasons have changed, I think, for the government to be involved in marriage.
That's
And
possible.
I'm not sure what reasons they have now, but they do need to be considered now instead of going merely on that.
It's possible.
And whether they should be involved in marriage at all, I don't know.
But you see the danger here.
Yeah.
We start to easily wiggle in room for the case of, wait, maybe we do sometimes need contraception, precisely because, think about it, if the government wanted to preserve its future population, say in the event of overpopulation, if ever such a thing occurred, then it would actually want to incentivize, right, some kind of contraceptive or a set of contraceptives, in which case it would actually, not follow that the government would not be interested, in which case it would not necessarily follow today, right? Or in that case, that the government would assume if people have sex, they're going to get pregnant. In fact, the government would try to thereby control the rate, the birth rate more precisely.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me like a multivariate system of equations may have possibly been reduced to a subset in which the analysis has been done.
I'd like to also I also wonder what he means. He's for traditional family values, or whatever you want to call it. You called it nuclear family.
I think that's one colloquial term, but I don't know if that definition or that terminology refers specifically to a biological relationship. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
But what I do think,
traditional family is without homosexuals or anything like that as a relationship as raising children.
I see.
And I wonder where he, well, we know he doesn't approve of it, but he did say he's libertarian on that, so he doesn't care. So what they do, and therefore doesn't even provide an argument why he doesn't.
Well, again, I think the problem we have is that he's trying to, however, argue that the government should incentivize certain behaviors, but under the scrutiny of very, lax analysis, that doesn't seem to hold under any, rigorous standard of analysis as a valid inference. That calls into question that doubt. And when you combine that with the libertarian ideology, it doesn't point in a direction of us being able to conclude much in the way of, gay marriage specifically.
Yeah.
But again, this also should be contextualized with the aforementioned possible problem, or problems, shall we say, associated with the foundations of libertarian ideologies.
Yeah. Should we play more?
And so we're going to subsidize that with tax benefits. By the way, there is no marriage benefit. There's a marriage penalty. My wife and I pay a significantly higher tax rate because we have a combined income.
I don't know. This is a potentially dangerous thing to say because the benefits may not be directly calculable, but implicitly. It's
sharing insurance and stuff. Wouldn't that be something? I know that they can, if you are married.
It may be true that insofar as the law is concerned, there are no direct written benefits.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for example, let me give an example. You, sir, and I, if we have two incomes and live in the same house, right?
Yeah.
We pay one rent. If the rent doesn't distinguish between the number of people in that particular household, then now between the two of us, a smaller partition of our income is being, paid for rent. And so there are potentially implicit benefits, but that's not unique to marriage, of course.
No.
But I think the point is we have to be careful. It's very difficult to argue for any set of relations, that there exist no possible benefits if and when there is even an argued deficit, because you may be able to actually, by imposing the deficit, imply an opportunity cost that implies some unforeseen implicit benefit.
Yeah. I'm
thinking, skeptical of this claim.
Insurance, for where I live, my mom started working at the university, and my dad was then able to go to college for free.
Oh, really?
Benefit as part of her job.
That's interesting.
And that's also how my sister and I were able to go to college.
Interesting.
So by merely being married, he was also able to attend college. So some people obviously can get insurance and other benefits.
I'm not sure. I'm not saying you're wrong.
Now, under the government, I don't know if they give tax incentives and stuff. I don't know much about taxes. So
I see. I'm not sure. That doesn't mean you're wrong. I'm not sufficiently educated in law to assess the veracity of the claim. However, I think this is kind of, this can conclude the analysis of this short clip. I think it's been fun, and I hope it's been productive for people. We'd like to kind of keep it live and interactive.
Indeed.
All right. Well, I think this will conclude this clip, and thank you guys for your time and attention.
Thank you.